In this video, we are going to be taking a deep dive from a betting point of view into each of the fights taking place this weekend at the UFC White House card. Hopefully, you'll be able to use the information in this video to make some extra cash this weekend. And obviously, it's been a great 2026 for us so far, where we're in profit on UFC pre-fight bets. We're also in profit on UFC live bets, and we are absolutely crushing it on football bets. We've made 33 units of profit on football just in the first 6 months of the year. So if we keep that up into the second half of 2026, this would be my biggest winning year financially of all time in my 15 years of betting on sports, and I've been a professional gambler for the last 9 years. So if I can just keep performing on football at the level that I have been in 2026, this will be my biggest year of all time. And if you want to come along with me on that journey, I am live streaming myself live betting every single game during the World Cup. So if you go to my channel, you can see we made a video with 56, it's actually 56 bets for the World Cup, not 57. So if you go watch that video, still time to get in on pretty much every single bet in that video, so go check that out. But if we go to the live tab, you could also see we live streamed, or I live streamed myself live betting the Mexico versus South Africa game earlier on, and in around about 2 hours and 45 minutes, I'll be live streaming myself here on YouTube, live betting the South Korea versus Czech Republic game 2, and we are putting in live streams for every single game in this World Cup. So if you want to make money this weekend, the World Cup is actually a much better opportunity for you to do that than the UFC. A lot of the UFC fights this weekend are going to be tricky from a betting point of view, but the World Cup games are looking pretty good, and we should be able to make some money live betting these World Cup games. So if you drop into one of these live betting sessions, if I find any live betting opportunities, any live bets in these games, I'll be letting you know in the live stream, and I'll also be talking to you about my strategies and how I am able to earn such a good return betting on what many people consider to be the most difficult sport to beat when it comes to betting in the world. And we're not just a little bit profitable on obscure markets when it comes to football. As you can see, I target only high liquidity markets. We don't bet on like obscure props like how many yellow cards a team is going to get or how many corners a team is going to get. We bet on the super high liquidity markets that you can bet on exchanges like Betfair Exchange, or Asian brokerages like Asian Odds 88, or sites like Pinnacle that aren't going to shut you down for making too much profit. So in terms of our level of performance on football, I am pretty elite, to be honest with you, and I'm probably one of the best in the world when it comes to betting on football. Like I say, football is the most popular sport in the world. It's the highest liquidity betting market in the world because it's got the most eyeballs on it, which means it is brutally difficult to produce any kind of profit at all on the sport of football. If you make a small loss betting football, that's actually a huge achievement. If you break even, if you float around break even on football, that's also a huge achievement. If you make any kind of profit on football at all over a large sample size, you are amongst some of the best, professional gamblers, sports bettors in the world, in my humble opinion. And I'm sure many people in the know would also agree with me. What's also super interesting is that if you look at our profitability chart on UFC live betting, obviously my speciality is UFC live betting and football live betting, you can see that this profit chart is incredibly consistent, and we've performed insanely well over the last 12 years. Our largest ever drawdown was minus 15 units, which is a giant nothing burger in the grand scheme of things, and that happened here. And this little flat patch by here is purely down to the fact that the broadcast delay time changed in the UK, and it took me a while to actually realise that. We didn't figure it out until about here, where you can start to see our profit curvature start to mirror how it was back in sort of 2022, 2023. So we're well on our way back to making huge gains in UFC live betting again now. But the reason why this profit chart looks so much more impressive than the football one is because before I started sharing my bets publicly and tracking everything publicly within my community, I'd already been live betting on the UFC for 3 or 4 years by myself, kind of learning my craft, developing profitable betting strategies, experimenting, tweaking different strategies and trying out different things. So by the time I started to share my bets publicly and track everything that I do, I'd already kind of optimized my betting strategies and kind of eliminated all the kinds of bets I was placing that were costing me money. And so by the time I came out and tracked things publicly, we hit the ground running, and we've been making money ever since with an incredible level of consistency. But if I would have started tracking everything that I did with UFC live betting from day one, as soon as I started to live bet the sport myself, the first couple of years probably would have been quite choppy, as I was still learning and figuring things out. I was still profitable, but you certainly wouldn't have this level of consistency that we've seen over the last 12 years. And so what's different about football live betting is that from day one, I publicly tracked everything that I did, every single bet that I placed from within my community. So that's why you see a much more choppy profit chart, where you've got, big runs up and then big dips and then big runs up and then big dips. It's because all of this here was me trying to develop profitable betting strategies. It was experimenting, it was tweaking, it was trying different things, and just constantly trying to tighten up and improve the strategies that I was using. And as you can see from this annotation here, I've labeled here that there was a major betting strategy change at this point. So, we were dipping for about a year. I was starting to panic. I was getting depressed, stressed, anxious. And so I spent a lot of time reflecting on the way I was doing things, analysing my performance, and I made some adjustments to my strategy that I'll go into in a lot more detail in these World Cup live streams if you want to hear about it. And ever since, you can see we've basically V-shaped. And so what's interesting about football live betting is that if we look at our overall profit and loss over the last 5 years, we've had an ROI of 1.9% across a sample size of 4,700 bets for a total profit of 73.66 units, which is an elite level of performance. This is an incredible level of performance, which puts me, at some of the best in the world when it comes to, betting the sport of football, probably betting any sport, to be honest with you. And I know you could probably go out there and find people making more profit with more ROI on a sport like football, but I highly doubt you'll find many people beating these kind of markets and producing these kind of numbers. If you see people that are producing these kind of numbers, they're probably betting lower liquidity betting markets like corners, cards, prop bets, all that kind of stuff. I only target the high liquidity stuff because, quite frankly, I am sick of having my betting accounts closed by betting sites for making too much money. And my main goal at this stage in my life, as I'm 40 years old, is to start enjoying life a little bit and not working so hard. So I've targeted the high liquidity betting markets so that I know I can bet with huge max bet limits on Asian brokerages and exchanges and make millions of dollars every year betting on football without having to worry about my accounts being closed down. And so what's interesting about our level of performance on football at the moment is over the last 5 years, our ROI has been 1.9%, which is very good for a sport like football. But it doesn't knock you off your chair, right? It's not mind-blowingly amazing level of performance in monetary terms. But what is interesting is the 1.9% ROI is obviously, an average of my performance over the last 5 years when I was still learning, still figuring things out, still tweaking my strategies, and trying to optimize everything that I do. If we flip to our profit this year, 2026, which has been since I made the change to my betting strategies, the major changes, you can see that we've got this nice, steady, consistent uptrend. And even if you look at this structure here, you can see I'm still tightening things up. This structure here looks very different from this structure here, where we're now getting even higher levels of consistency over the last 3 months, dating back to March. And so this year, in 2026 alone, we've made 33 units of profit across a sample size of almost 900 bets, which is a really good sample size to add a bit of weight and credibility to these numbers. So this year, 2026, we've hit an ROI of 4.6%, which is obviously more than double our longer term ROI over the last 5 years of 1.9%. Now, the reason why this is very interesting is because, like I said, I've made a major change to my betting strategy on football. So what that ultimately means is when things normalize, I would expect my ROI, like my true real life ROI in 2026 as it exists today, to be somewhere between 1.9% and 4.6%. The logic being the 1.9% ROI is an average over the last 5 years where we've had these big dips, and I'm still learning, I'm still figuring things out, I'm still trying to optimize my betting strategies, experiment with new strategies, and try lots of different things to find out what works. Now that I am getting close to a mastery level of what I do, because I've put thousands of hours into becoming profitable on football, and I've learned so much in that time, I would expect my true ROI as it exists today to settle somewhere between 4.6% and 1.9%, possibly around 3.5%, which would put me in the top tier elite sports bettors in the world. So just want to go through that with you, because otherwise this video is going to be really short, because there's not a whole lot to talk about with UFC this week. Yes, it's a big hyped event at the White House, but the fights are a bit shit, and the real opportunity if you want to make money this weekend is going to be in the live streams with me on YouTube, live betting these World Cup games. If you can't make every live stream, or if you can't sit in there for the entire duration of the live stream to catch the live bets, the next best thing is to join my football betting group. You'll find a link for that in the description below, and all it means is whenever I place a live bet on any football match, you'll receive a notification to your phone, which you can just fire up your betting app, place the bet very quickly. And of course, there's a lot of other games taking place throughout June, so it's not just going to be the World Cup we're betting. We're already actually up 7.37 units in June already, and we're only 11 or 12 days into the month, and the majority of stuff we've been betting over the last 12 days has been the Mauricio tournament, which is like a youth international tournament, and also the USL Championship, because that league is still running in the United States, and we've actually got a ton of games for that tomorrow night. So we'll probably dig up a good amount of bets on USL Championship tomorrow. If we go actually to the USL Championship, see how we've been doing. So if we bring up the USL Championship, you can see we perform really well on it. Nice, steady, consistent uptrend. 11 units of profit across a sample size of 63 bets for a 26% ROI, which is very, very, very impressive. If we also switch to the USL League One, probably haven't got as many bets in this league. We don't. Bit choppier, 0.5 units of profit against a sample size of 7 bets. But either way, if we then switch to the USA, the good old USA of the United States of America, you can see very nice, steady, consistent uptrend, 34 units of profit across a sample size of 356 bets for an ROI of 12%. So there are lots of leagues we're wildly profitable on, some we're not, which is again contributing to the choppiness. And one of the ways that I've refined these strategies to perform much better in 2026 than previous years is betting more on the leagues that I know I perform well on, less on the leagues that I don't. And if you come down to this profitability matrix here, you can kind of see the leagues that we perform really well on, and then the ones that we don't perform so well on. So less of shit like this, more of shit like this. That's the key to profitability, baby. All right. Hopefully I'll see you in the football betting group, link in the description below. One more thing, this is a brand new website I've built, which is going to be coming in the next few days, but if you want to join the football live betting group or the UFC live betting group today to get those bets to your phone this weekend, you need to go on the old website, unfortunately, because this one isn't properly set up for memberships and all that kind of stuff yet. My old website is, which doesn't look great, it's buggy, it's broken, but it does work. And yeah, link in the description below. The old website looks like this, and the new one looks like this, and it will be launching very, very soon, very shortly. We'll actually be using it in this video to break down this UFC card. We'll actually be using it right now, right here, so you can kind of see how well it works. So we'll start off with probably the best fight on the entire card, in my opinion, is Diego Lopes versus Steve Garcia. As you can see, Diego Lopes is the slight favourite, odds of 1.65. Steve Garcia, slight underdog, odds of 2.25. You can see your American odds there for those of you in the United States. That gives us an implied probability of roughly 60-40 in Diego Lopes's favour. And this is an amazing fight. Really, really good stylistic matchup. The way that I would look at this one is from a technical point of view. Steve Garcia is a far better striker. You look at his performance against Calvin Kattar. He moves well. He uses his length really well. He's got true legit knockout power. Just fast, just technical, great cardio, fights at a very, very high pace. I mean, if you look at average number of strikes landed per minute, I mean, Garcia lands a very high volume of strikes per minute, 5.39 per minute, which is 1.01 above the average in the UFC, whereas Diego Lopes slightly below average. The real difference between these two on the feet is Diego Lopes is a bit of a one-dimensional striker. He does have major power, but he's got a very boxing-based style of striking where he kind of plods forward behind the high boxing guard, making him a bit of a sitting duck on the feet. Whereas Steve Garcia, he's light on his feet, he's got good footwork, good movement, uses length well, throws a more diverse range of strikes, he's technical, he's faster, and he hits pretty fucking hard just like Diego Lopes as well. But we saw in the Alexander Volkanovski fight how, and to some extent early in the Gene Silva fight, how much Lopes struggles against a fighter who is mobile and can kind of bounce around him and chip away at him. Lopes really struggles with opponents that move well on the feet. So when it comes to striking, I give Steve Garcia quite a big advantage. Now, there is one area in this fight that Diego Lopes has a huge advantage. I'm not sure if it will matter too much, but he will have, based on past performances, an absolutely giant advantage on the ground. Now, the reason why I don't think it's going to matter that much is because Diego Lopes doesn't actually try to shoot, or he doesn't try to take his opponents down that much. He's one of these guys that, you know, prefers to stand and bang, prefers to put on exciting fights. But he does have a base in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. He will have a huge advantage on the ground. Unfortunately, as you can see the takedown average per 15 minutes, Diego Lopes only shoots on average less than one takedown attempt per 15 minutes. So you can see Lopes prefers to stand and bang, but if he tries to stand and bang with Steve Garcia, I think he's going to struggle very bad on the feet. So does that increase the probability that Lopes will look to grapple? I don't know. But certainly on the feet, I think Lopes could have his hands full here. Now, if we bring up Steve Garcia's full record for us to take a look at here, I want to touch on the reasons why I think Lopes has such a huge edge on the ground. And now, I'm not going to make this breakdown video super long. Or actually, shall we do it? Shall we show you, boys? Shall we show you? I think we will show you. I think we'll show you because, let's be honest, there's not really a whole lot else to focus on with this card. So I'm going to show you a little bit of footage so you can understand the reasons why Steve Garcia might be in a hell of a lot of trouble if this fight goes to the ground. Alright, I found the fight. Luis Pena versus Steve Garcia. So I'll show you a few fights just to show you how bad Garcia is on the ground. Now, it is worth noting that this was Steve Garcia's UFC debut against Luis Pena. He'd never fought in the UFC before, so we can always let a guy off for having an off night in the UFC debut, octagon jitters, all that kind of stuff. But this will set the scene for just how bad Garcia is on the ground. Now again, I also know that this fight is 5 years old, so Garcia, training at Jackson Wink MMA, will likely have improved a lot since this fight, but until we see it, we don't want to make assumptions. So we will skim through this fight as quickly as we can so that the breakdown doesn't end up being super duper 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 long. But you see Garcia gets the takedown there, but then Pena quickly pops back up to his feet and gets to this kind of body lock position where he's controlling Garcia from behind. There's 4 minutes left to go in the round. He then drags Garcia to the ground, and again, I'm just going to skip through really quickly. We don't want to drag this one out. You can see that from back control, Luis Pena, he's been on the ground for about 2 minutes at this point. Pena just basically completely dominates Garcia on the ground for the entire first round, essentially. So then if we get into round 2, have I skipped through round 2? I have indeed. Sorry, guys. Let's go back to the beginning of round 2. Again, I'm going to skip through really quick. I just want to kind of illustrate to you how bad Garcia is on the ground. So start of round 2. Garcia looks to bum rush Pena, but Pena gets the same position. Body lock, back control position. And if we just skim through, he gets Garcia's back, just keeps Garcia's back for pretty much the whole of round 2. You can see Pena completely dominating, probably a 10-8 round in that second round, to be fair. Then if we look at round 3, this time Pena bum rushes Garcia. And if we skip through, just again, same sort of thing, takes his back early in the round and just dominates him from back control for the rest of the round. So I know we just whizzed through that very quickly, but I just wanted to illustrate to you just how bad Steve Garcia is on the ground. But that was 5 years ago, and it was his UFC debut. So we should never judge a fighter just on one bad performance. So let's take a look at the Shailan Norden BK fight. So if we bring up this one, again, we're just going to try and whiz through as quickly as possible. And this is the one we want. Apologies, I hate how Fight Pass auto plays the audio no matter how many times you change your default setting. Here we go. Again, we're just going to skip through very, very quick because we don't want this breakdown to be super duper long. Here we go. Round 1. Norton BK already faking the takedowns. Knocks Garcia down with the right hand there. Now obviously anyone can get punched very hard in the face in a cage fight to the death. No surprise there. It's mixed martial arts. But you can see Norton BK takes top position here with about 4 minutes left to go in round 1. And if we just skip through again very quickly, like with the Luis Pena fight, you can see that Garcia, even though he's able to work his way back up to his feet, quickly gets taken back down by Norton BK here. And then with 2 minutes 20 seconds left to go in the round, Norton BK easily beats Garcia up from top position for a long period of time before essentially Norton BK just lets Garcia back up. And then right at the end of the round, Garcia also gives up another cheap takedown after almost finishing Norton BK. But as you can see, Garcia is very easy to take down and very easy to control in these positions. So then in the second round, Garcia comes out the gate hard at the beginning of round 2 and kills Norton BK very quickly. And then if we take a look at the Melquizael Costa fight, I think there's a bit of grappling in this one as well. If I remember rightly, here it is. No, that's Norton BK. Melquizael. There we go. Melquizael. Where are you? Where are you, Mr. Garcia? Where are you? Here we go. Alright, into the first round of this one as well. So, again, we're going to skip through as quick as we can. Don't want to make this breakdown any longer than it needs to be. Costa gets the same position as Pena. Back control off that body lock. And if we just skim through, you see Garcia just hesitates in this position, just allowing Costa to kind of hold him up against the cage for pretty much the entire round. So this is a big weakness, and that's the end of round 1. Garcia basically gets controlled up against the cage for the entire round. So that's obviously a massive weakness in Steve Garcia's overall skill set, which isn't good, to be perfectly honest with you. It's not very good at all. Very, very bad on the ground. Now obviously we haven't seen that be an issue over the last couple of years because the Onama fight ended very quickly. Kate is a striker that didn't try to take him down, and then the Carl Nelson and the Sung Woo Choi fights all ended very quickly in round 1. So we don't really know if Garcia has improved his urgency to work out of grappling positions since the Melquizael Costa fight just over 2 years ago. But you know, until we see him show improvement, we can't make assumptions that he has. So from my perspective, that does give Garcia potentially big problems in this fight, and it does give Lopes a big obvious path to victory, where if Lopes grapples in this one, you'd assume that he would win pretty easily. The problem is he doesn't grapple very much in his fights, and if he looks to win a stand-up fight here, I think Steve Garcia is the superior striker. I think Garcia will dance around him and beat him in a similar sort of way to what he did to Calvin Kattar. I know Lopes hits a lot harder than Kattar, but they do kind of have the same stance, where they kind of plod forward behind the high boxing guard and look to pressure you. So I think Garcia's proven against Kattar he can deal with that style pretty well, and this one's going to come down to whether or not Lopes grapples. So for me personally, from a pre-fight betting point of view, there's no way that I would bet Garcia is just a slight underdog at an implied probability of 42%. I'd have to give him at least a 50% chance of winning to get any kind of value here, and with having that huge hole in his game on the ground, it's very difficult for me to do that. I'm just not interested in a fighter that is as bad as Garcia is on the ground. And then if we consider Diego Lopes, I'm not interested in betting him either, because to get any value on him, I'd have to give him like a 65% chance of winning, which is very difficult to do when I think he'll get outstruck by Garcia, and he only shoots on average 1 takedown per 15 minutes, which is kind of not very good if you want him to use grappling to win this fight. So this matchup's an easy pass for me, but hopefully we'll be able to live bet this one. This is one of those fights which is one of the better ones for live betting on this card. So if you want to make a profit in 72% of months of the year, earn yourself a lot of extra cash every year to help with the cost of living, how brutal times are at the moment financially for a lot of people, UFC live betting is the way to go. As you can see, we are ruthlessly consistent over the last 12 years, and that ain't going to slow down or stop anytime soon. So much profit and much opportunity lay ahead of us. So if we now take a look at the over-unders and the prop bets, I would be surprised if this fight were to go to a decision, just because both guys very dangerous on the feet. Garcia's very aggressive, Lopes true legit knockout power, and with how bad Garcia looks on the ground, I think if Lopes you know, does come in with a grappling heavy game plan, like someone said on the live stream earlier on, when we were live betting the South Africa versus Mexico game, Lopes does do a lot of damage with his ground and pound from top position. So with that being said, I could see Lopes getting a finish on the ground, but the odds reflect that, and you know, fight not to go to a decision at 1.45, which is only a little bit better than -250. Too steep a price for me to pay, easy pass. And then in terms of the fight spreads, Garcia plus 3.5, 1.83, which is about -120. Those odds are interesting to me. I am tempted to take Garcia plus 3.5 just because I think he's capable of actually winning the fight outright. And in fact, we probably will go for that. Yeah, there you go. There's a bet for you. We'll go Steve Garcia plus 3.5 because I think he's capable of just straight up outstriking Lopes. And with Lopes only shooting an average of 1 takedown per 15 minutes, if he doesn't come in with a grappling, or even if he does grapple like he usually grapples, he might only have 1 round's worth of grappling in him. Even if he had 2 rounds of grappling worth in him, if the fight went to a decision, then Garcia would still be able to nick 1 round with his striking and take. Do you know what? I'm not going to bet that. I'm not actually. I'm not going to bet it. I'm not going to bet it. I'm going to stick to the plan on this one, and I'm going to pass, because a lot of the time when you see guys like Steve Garcia accept being in bad positions on the ground, it is an indication that they can be broken mentally if put in really bad positions on the ground, and Lopes is more than capable of doing that. So I'm actually going to pass. I'm not going to bet this fight. Forget what I said. Yeah, we're going to move on to the next one, which is going to be Bo Nickal versus Kyle Daukaus. The start of the problems with this event, really. This could have been a historic, I mean, it will be a historic event in terms of setting, but fuck me, Dana. what are you doing, mate? What are you actually doing with this fight and many of the other fights on this card? It just makes no sense to me. So Bo Nickal's a pretty big favourite, 1.30 minus 335. Daukaus 3.50 plus 250. And we can see that means Bo Nickal's a very steep favourite at an implied probability of 73%. So this is a tricky one because obviously, you know, Bo Nickal looked good in his last performance against Rodolfo Vieira, where he kind of dominated a very high level Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt, very good MMA grappler. But we did see Bo Nickal absolutely melt in his fight against Reina Derrida. Now, I think a big part of the reason why Nickal struggled in that fight is that Derrida was smashing him with knees to the body in the clinch when Bo was trying to get takedowns. And obviously, Daukaus isn't the most dangerous striker. Having said that, I will go out and say something very controversial that almost everyone watching this will disagree with. I think Derrida's MMA grappling is a fucking joke. I think it's shockingly bad. He had a bit of success on the ground against Robert Whittaker, but if you go and look at his MMA grappling against Brendan Allen and also against Gerald Meerschaert, Derrida looked exceptionally low level on the ground. I don't think there's a massive difference in terms of MMA grappling skills between Carl Daukaus and Reina Derrida. Therefore, you know, Daukaus isn't completely dead in the water here. If you go back and watch Nickal's fight against Derrida, yes, the knees to the body in the clinch from Derrida caused Nickal problems, but when he was put on his back by Derrida, he also looked extremely weak off his back. So if Nickal were to slip or, you know, lose a scramble, end up on the bottom, and Daukaus got on top of him, I do think there are opportunities for Daukaus to, you know, have some success in this fight and make things interesting. And of course, when it comes to fights like this, it's very easy to misunderstand my perspective, right? Ultimately, I'm a professional gambler that makes a living from live betting on the UFC, live betting on football. Anyone with eyes and a brain knows that Bo Nickal is more likely to win this fight. He wouldn't be a huge favourite if that wasn't the case at an implied probability of 73%. But my job is to map out all the different realistic scenarios that could play out and play devil's advocate a little bit and see if there's any opportunity in the odds where we can find little edges, and if one guy is being overvalued and one guy is being undervalued. The reason why in fights like this I often focus more on the underdog's positives than the favourite is because at an implied probability of 73%, it's pretty much impossible to bet Bo Nickal. To get any kind of value on him at all, you'd have to give him like an 80% chance of winning, which is impossible when you look at how he basically broke mentally and caved against Reina Derrida. I wouldn't trust this guy in this odds range anymore. Whereas Carl Daukaus at an implied probability of 27%, it's far easier to justify a bet on someone like this, because if you bet $1,000 on Bo Nickal, you're only getting, you know, $300 profit if you win, but you could lose $1,000. Whereas if you bet $1,000 on Carl Daukaus, you're obviously getting $2,500 profit, and you're not losing your initial grand. So far easier to justify bets on the underdog in fights like this. But I will not be betting this fight because, you know, Bo Nickal looked very good against Rodolfo Vieira. His MMA grappling looked decent against a very, very good MMA grappler. And, you know, it's not like Carl Daukaus is crazy dangerous on the feet. I think a lot of the success Derrida had against Nickal came down to, you know, him being able to kind of break Nickal mentally and keep him in a bad position on the ground, because Nickal kind of settled there because of how much Derrida was hurting him on the feet. Daukaus not as dangerous as Derrida on the feet, and likely as a result Nickal won't give him the same opportunities to cause him problems on the ground. So Nickal should win, but if you really want to bet this fight, it is clearly dog or pass. It's clearly Carl Daukaus or nothing, although I have no interest in betting that fight personally. If we take a look at the over-under or the fight spreads, you can see that the over-under is currently close to that even money odds range, My lean would be this fight would go to a decision, which I know would contradict their records somewhat, because if you look at, I'm not going to bring up the whole record, but you can see that Daukaus' fights frequently end quite quickly, and a good number of Nickal's fights end inside the distance as well. But I do think styles make fights, and I do think both guys are reasonably skilled to the point where they could probably defend themselves on the ground when put in bad positions, and neither of them are all that dangerous on the feet. So my lean would be the over 2.5 rounds, but I'm not going to bet it because I don't feel confident enough on it. In terms of the fight spreads, I wouldn't bet either of the fight spreads. I've just really not got any interest in this fight, really. Hopefully we can make some money live betting it. I think that's our best chance of profiting from this fight. So if you're not in the live betting group for this weekend, jump on board. If you want to make a profit almost every month of the year, 72% a month, almost 5 units of profit per month on average, come and join the team. Membership will pay for itself. You won't regret it. You'll absolutely love it. But from a pre-fight betting point of view, this one is impossibly difficult. We now move on to Mauricio, Ruffy and Michael Chandler. There's a lot of big favourites on this card. I think Ruffy is the biggest favourite on the card, and I'm not surprised. Although Chandler isn't dead in the water here, there are opportunities for him. Now, obviously, Chandler is very old at 40 years old, and he looked awful against Paddy Pimblett. It looked like Father Time caught up with him in a very big way. But he does have an advantage over Ruffy when it comes to grappling, and quite an enormous advantage as well. In Ruffy's fight against Benoit Saint-Denis, he repeatedly gave up very cheap takedowns and looked extremely low level on the ground. Chandler is a former NCAA Division I level wrestler, good offensive wrestling, good MMA grappling, and very aggressive on the ground as well with his ground and pound. The issue with Chandler's grappling is that his cardio is very bad, and at 40 years old, it's not going to be getting any better. And the problem with Chandler is the more he grapples, the faster he tires himself out. So whilst Chandler can have a lot of success if he grapples in this fight, my question would be, how much grappling are we going to get from him? Now, if you look at the average number of takedowns that Chandler shoots per 15 minutes, is 1.96, which is slightly above the average in the UFC of 1.54 per 15 minutes. However, against a young hungry bull like Ruffy, you likely want to be shooting a lot more takedowns than 2 per 15 minutes and using some persistent grappling, some chain wrestling, in order to wet blanket Ruffy and keep this fight on the ground. So this is one of those fights where, based on past performances, Chandler's old, his cardio's bad, he looked awful against Paddy Pimblett, he doesn't grapple as much as we'd like. Obviously, it's an absolute no-brainer that Ruffy should win this, but his odds reflect that, and an implied probability of 84% and an odds of 1.14 minus 714. So if you really want to bet this fight, it goes without saying that this is clearly dog or pass. There's no way you can bet Ruffy. It has to be Chandler if you're going to bet this fight. And he does have passed the victory. Ruffy looked absolutely fucking dreadful on the ground against Benoit Saint-Denis. Problem is, I wouldn't expect Chandler to grapple as much as he's going to need to in order to win this fight, because we know he likes to stand and bang, and he wants to be the BMF, and he wants to put on a good show for President Trump and all that shit. And even if he does grapple hard, he may find that he gasses himself out, which enables Ruffy to kind of take him out late on. So yeah, this one is another very easy pass for me. Again, hopefully we can make some money in live betting on this matchup, but it won't be easy, and I think the odds reflect how likely this one is to be very one-sided. Pretty good chance Ruffy KOs Chandler early, with how fragile Chandler has looked in the past, and how dangerous Ruffy is on the feet. We'll see how it goes. In terms of the over-under and also the fight spreads, obviously very likely this fight ends inside the distance. The odds reflect that. We can't bet that. And in terms of the fight spread, Ruffy should win inside the distance, so no interest in the fight spreads either. It's another pretty dead fight from a pre-fight betting point of view. It's Chandler or pass, but I wouldn't put my money in danger. There's far too many opportunities to make money in this game to be placing high-risk bets on 40-year-old guys like Chandler, but I wouldn't be touching Ruffy at these odds. We now move on to breaking down the fight between Josh Hokit and Derrick Lewis. Now, I am extremely high on Josh Hokit. He's probably not going to get the credit that he deserves because of his old WWE shtick and his crazy personality and the fact that he did take a lot of damage in the Curtis Blaydes fight. But for me, Hokit has all the attributes required to be a champion in the heavyweight division. I think he would beat Ciryl Gane easily. I think he would beat Alex Pereira easily. And I also think he'd beat Tom Aspinall easily. I think Josh Hokit is the uncrowned king of the heavyweight division. And I think he's an absolute nightmare. I'm very, very, very high on Josh Hokit. Unfortunately, the odds agree with me. And his odds carry an implied probability of 78% this weekend, which is 1.23 minus 435, which makes it impossible to bet him, because even though I'm extremely high on Josh Hokit, ultimately it's the heavyweight division. Lewis is one of the most devastating knockout artists in the history of the sport, and it only takes one clean hard punch to land to end Hokit's night. Now, Hokit did show an incredible level of toughness and durability in the Curtis Blaydes fight, where he ate multiple bombs, pushed through, kept fighting. But obviously there's a big difference between eating a clean hard shot from Curtis Blaydes and eating a clean hard shot from Derrick Lewis. No matter how tough, no matter how durable you are, no matter how good your chin is, it might not matter against Derrick Lewis. One clean shot could be enough to put you away. But for me, I'm very high on Hokit. He has all the attributes required to be the king of the heavyweight division, because he has decent cardio for a heavyweight. He's a great offensive wrestler with really good MMA grappling. He's tough as nails. He's durable. He's got a good chin. He fights at a very high pace, and he's well-rounded. You know, there are very few guys in the heavyweight division that are as well-rounded as Hokit, as durable as Hokit, and can push the kind of pace that Hokit can push. In fact, I can't think of anyone else, which is why I think he is the best heavyweight in the world right now, and I think it's only a matter of time before he wins the title. I think if he fought Ciryl Gane, he would take him down and maul him. If he fought Alex Pereira, he would take him down and maul him. And I think if he fought Tom Aspinall, he would also take Aspinall down and maul him. So watch this space with Hokit. I think he's going to be a future champ, and at 28 years old, he is a baby for the heavyweight division. He's still got 4, 5, 6 years of improving to do, and to think he's already this good at 28 years old is kind of scary. This is a particularly bad matchup for Derrick Lewis, because we know Derrick Lewis has terrible takedown offense. He's weak in the lower body. He's injury prone. We've seen him injure his back and his knees in a lot of his fights. And Hokit's offensive wrestling, his MMA grappling, looks legitimately great. So if Hokit did run into any trouble on the feet, should easily be able to level change, upset Lewis's balance, get into the ground, and just dominate Lewis on the ground. We've all seen situations where Lewis has struggled very bad on the ground, and this is probably going to be another one of those fights. So great stylistic matchup for Hokit. He should win this very easily. I think the only way Lewis wins this is by flash KO, but then that's pretty much the case with every Derrick Lewis fight these days. So obviously very likely this fight will end inside the distance, because either Hokit's going to get knocked out on the feet, or obviously, you know, Derrick Lewis will probably wilt under the pressure that Hokit looks to put on him and quit at some point. And so we can't bet the over-under. The odds are too steep on the fight not to go to a decision. And then in terms of the fight spreads, I wouldn't touch the spreads either, because again, Hokit very, very likely to win, and the odds are just too steep. I will say the same about this fight that I've said about Ruffy, Chandler and Nickal Daukaus. If you just want to bet this fight for a bit of action to make watching the fights more entertaining, you can't touch Hokit. Unfortunately, he's too big of a favourite. So it is dog or pass. If you want to bet this fight, you've got to take Derrick Lewis, but I don't expect him to win. I'm very, 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 very high on Josh, and fully expecting him to win and then give a truly unhinged post-fight interview on the world's biggest stage, the White House lawn. Speaking of one-sided fights and squash matches and fights that are very difficult for pre-fight betting, we've got another one here, Sean O'Malley versus Aiemann and Zahabi, and another example of, in my opinion, how poor, how bad, how lackluster this card is when it comes to matchmaking. We probably shouldn't spend too much time on this one. It's a terrible stylistic matchup for Aiemann Zahabi, and I think this is one of those classic situations where the UFC are throwing a fighter to the wolves against the worst stylistic matchup imaginable, so that, you know, a guy like Sean O'Malley can put on a, you know, really impressive performance in front of the president on the world stage, and have a nice big old win for America. Very, very, very lazy, awful, shitty matchmaking this. It's just a terrible stylistic matchup for Aiemann Zahabi. Even though Zahabi has had some competitive fights over the last few years against Basharat, Munoz, Aldo, Vera, we can't forget that he's actually really chinny. And if you go back a bit further in his career, Zahabi is a guy that frequently gets rocked, wobbled, dropped or knocked out in his fights. In fact, if you go back and watch the Jose Aldo fight, Aldo rocked him a couple times. Zahabi is very chinny, and we know that Sean O'Malley is an absolute sniper on the feet. You know, he's a magician with his footwork, his movement, you know, the way that he uses his length, his diversity of attacks, how good he is defensively, how good he is at reading his opponents. So I would expect Sean O'Malley to dance around Zahabi, put on an absolute masterclass of a performance, and probably knock Aiemann Zahabi out on Saturday night. And I think this will be a pretty impressive performance from Sean. He'll probably look to take Zahabi out, and I think he will get the knockout. Just a terrible stylistic matchup for Zahabi. Look, we know O'Malley's not great on the ground. We know Zahabi has trained at TriStar his whole career under his brother's tutelage, Varas Zahabi. But, you know, even though he probably does have an advantage over Sean on the ground, you know, he only shoots on average 0.12 takedowns per 15 minutes. So the chance of him actually trying to use a grappling heavy game plan this weekend is so slim, and O'Malley should get the win very, 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 very easily. This is also a young man's game, and at 38 years old, Zahabi is going to be declining from fight to fight. So, again, I mean, this one's a bit different to Lewis and Chandler and Daukaus, where we're kind of saying, look, because Hokit, Ruffy and Nickal are such big favourites, it's kind of dog or pass. It's very difficult with this one, because at least with the other fights, you know, Lewis, Chandler and Daukaus have got clear and obvious paths to victory. Nickal is a mental midget. We saw him quit against Derrick. You know, Ruffy's got a terrible ground game. Lewis has got crazy power, can knock out anyone in the world on his day. With Zahabi, though, it's far more difficult, because he doesn't really have knockout power. He's not going to be able to match Sean in terms of, like, technique. I mean, you can even see Sean lands more strikes on average per minute. It's a bit of a checkmate fight. So this is the one fight I would say, you know what, instead of betting dog or pass, you probably want to look at something to do with Sean in this fight if you can. If we look at the fight spread and the over-unders, very likely this fight will end inside the distance, in my opinion, but there's probably not much point in betting the under, because I don't see Zahabi getting a finish. If you do want to bet this fight, rather than taking the under, I would take O'Malley by knockout or TKO. No, actually, don't do that, because it's practically the same odds. I'm not going to bet this personally, because the odds aren't good enough for me to take the bet. It's not a good enough margin for me. I don't have a high enough degree in confidence. But if you want to bet this fight to make watching it more entertaining, I would take fight not to go to a decision at 2.35. That's what I would personally go for. And in terms of the fight spread, I'm not interested in that. The odds are too tight on the minus 3.15. So another dead fight from a pre-fight betting point of view. I wish I could say, hopefully we can make some money in live betting on it. I mean, hopefully we can, but I doubt we'll be able to. This matchup's going to be a real tricky one. Now we move on to, again, one of the most interesting fights on the card alongside Diego Lopes, Steve Garcia. It's Alex Pereira moving up to heavyweight to take on Ciryl Gane for the heavyweight championship of the world. And it might actually be the proper legit heavyweight title now, because it doesn't look like Aspinall is going to be fighting anytime soon with the issues going on between Eddie Hearn and Dana White. So both guys are in the even money odds range, which means if you shop around, you can bet both of them at pretty much the same odds. Although I think if we move down to the odds analysis charts, we can see Gane's odds have started to dip a little bit. over the last sort of 24 hours, and I'm seeing Gane as low as like 1.80, which is minus 120 on some sites out there right now. So I think odds are starting to move in Gane's favour, which I do understand. I do favour Gane in this matchup, but I think Alex Pereira at heavyweight is a bit of an intangible, right? We don't know how he's going to look in this new weight class. And he's obviously similar to Derrick Lewis. He's got the power to kill anyone in the world on his day with that crazy, true, legit one-shot KO power. So when you look at how these two match up from a stylistic point of view, they're both very bad on the ground. Now, I wouldn't expect either of these guys to look to get this fight to the ground. Pereira only shoots 0.11 takedowns on average per 15 minutes, and Gane 0.68 takedowns per 15 minutes. So I doubt that either of these will look to get the fight to the ground, although we did see a little bit of grappling from Ciryl Gane when he fought Francis Ngannou and Alexander Volkanovski in his last fight. So both these guys are awful on the ground. I would give Gane the slight advantage on the ground, just because Pereira's looked particularly weak off his back, but both guys are dreadful on the ground, you know what I mean, like that goes without saying. But this should be a stand-up fight, right? They're both primarily strikers, so let's focus on that. Now, we can see that both guys land about the same amount of strikes per minute, very, very close. They have the same level of accuracy pretty much. You can see that Gane is better defensively, but it is worth noting that obviously Gane has been fighting in the heavyweight division where he's fought a lot of stiff, slow guys like Volkov, Spivak. You know, they're going to improve his average compared to Pereira that's been fighting fast technical strikers like Khalil Roundtree, Jamal Hill, Israel Adesanya, Magomed Ankalaev. So just because on paper Gane is better defensively, you know, if Gane were fighting these faster, more technical guys, he might not be as good defensively as Pereira. And I actually think Pereira is excellent defensively. He reads his opponent really well. And yeah, great head movement, you know, great footwork. He's quite flat-footed and planted, but he does read his opponents very well. So in terms of how these two match up from a stylistic point of view, I think it's going to be the power of Pereira, who will almost certainly land the harder, more damaging shots, versus the volume of Ciryl Gane. And both guys are very good defensively. When you look at the strikes landed per minute, they are both virtually identical. But for me, for whatever reason, Ciryl Gane just looks like a much more high-volume striker at a consistent level. So if you look at Alex Pereira's fights against, you know, the first one against Magomed Ankalaev, the fights against Israel Adesanya, you know, the early stages of the Khalil Roundtree fight, there are long periods of inactivity where you don't get much output from Pereira over, you know, 1, 2, 3 minutes at a time, which does make him quite easy to outpoint. Ciryl Gane is far more consistent with his output. He's always chipping away at you with the jab, the leg kick, and as soon as you come forward to counter him or attack him, he's very good at backing up, circling away, getting on his bike, and you know, getting out of harm's way essentially. So this is quite a difficult fight to call. You know, there are scenarios where Pereira could look a lot better at heavyweight, because, you know, he's a very technical striker that against lighter, smaller opponents at light heavyweight, maybe his stiffness and slowness stands out more against, you know, at light heavyweight against these faster, more mobile guys. But maybe Pereira will actually look very fast and very technical at heavyweight, and he won't look so flat-footed and planted like he does at light heavyweight and at middleweight, because he's now facing bigger guys. So it's possible that Pereira could look a lot more technical at heavyweight, a lot faster at heavyweight. But he could also look a bit more sluggish because he's carrying a lot of extra weight into the fight, and perhaps his power doesn't really go up to the heavyweight division. We see it sometimes where, you know, Davison Figueiredo is the best example I can think of. When he fought at flyweight, You know, he had crazy power and he would knock guys flying 6, 7, 8 feet across the octagon. And then when Deiveson Figueiredo moved up to bantamweight, all of a sudden he just lost all the power in his hands because he was facing bigger guys that could deal with his power and his physicality better. Maybe we'll see that from Pereira, I don't know. But yeah, in terms of this matchup from a stylistic point of view, it's a great fight. I slightly lean towards Gane just because we know exactly how he looks at heavyweight. I think he's got the advantage on the ground. His cardio is more proven and battle tested at heavyweight. It's possible with all that extra weight Pereira's carrying into this division, he may slow down more than usual at middleweight and light heavyweight. Although Gane doesn't really make you work very hard, to be fair. He throws a high volume of strikes, but it's not like he forces you to fight at a crazy pace. I just think Gane is like the safe bet here because you know exactly what you're going to get from him. You know he's tough and durable. You know, he's gone the distance with Francis Ngannou. He's gone the distance with heavy hitters, or he's almost gone the distance with heavy hitters like Tai Tuivasa. We know that Gane can take a shot. He does have a good chin on him. So he's tough, he's durable, he's got great cardio, high output, probably has the advantage on the ground. Gane is the safe bet for me in this fight. I think he's more likely to win, but I don't feel super confident in him because Pereira could look better at heavyweight. You know, he's a very, very dangerous striker, very experienced, very good defensively, has more power out of the two. I lean Gane, but not with enough confidence to bet him in this one. It's an easy pass for me. Hopefully we can make some money on it in live betting. Should be a competitive fight. I just hope it doesn't end early. I don't want to see a quick 30-second knockout like we sometimes get from Pereira. I would love to see more of a technical chess match between these two that goes deep. So in terms of the over-under on this one, I wouldn't actually be surprised if this fight went to a decision. You know, we've seen Pereira go the distance with Izzy. We've seen Pereira go the distance with Ankalaev in their first fight. Gane's a bit of a decisionator. He went the decision with Francis Ngannou. So I wouldn't be surprised if this one went to a decision. I don't really have a strong opinion either way on the over-under, if I'm honest. My lean would be over, because I think when you've got guys that are so good defensively, they'll show each other a lot of respect. And, you know, this isn't going to be like I don't think this is going to be like a crazy war where you see both guys getting into big exchanges. I think you'll see it be a chess match where they both try and chip away at one another. But they're both so good defensively and they're both tough and durable as well. And in terms of the fight spread, Ciryl Gane plus 5.5. That's pretty good actually, because I do think Ciryl Gane could just win the fight on merit. Just not in love with anything betting wise on this card. So I think, you know what, let's move on to the main event between Ilia Topuria and Justin Gaethje. So Topuria, very big favourite on this card. You can understand why. He is a great boxer. He's got true legit knockout power. He's likely to be even more dangerous now at lightweight. And he moves very well. And he's got a base in wrestling. And he's the total package. And he's very, very good. And Justin Gaethje at 37 years old has never been the best defensively. He has taken a lot of damage in his career. And at 37 years old, Father Time's undefeated, and he's not going to be getting any better. So from a technical point of view, at this stage in their careers, Topuria is going to be better than Gaethje in every single aspect of MMA. The only real weakness we've seen in Topuria in his UFC career is there were some fights earlier in his career against like Bryce Mitchell, for example, where he did slow down quite a lot as fights progressed. Now, obviously, his cardio's looked a lot better over the last few years. You know, he went 5 rounds with Josh Emmett, didn't slow down at all. But I think even if Topuria were to get a bit tired here, it won't matter a whole lot because Justin Gaethje also slows as fights wear on. But, you know, at the end of the day, Gaethje does hit hard. He hurt Paddy Pimblett multiple times, inflicted a lot of damage on Paddy in his last fight. You know, this is one of those matchups where Topuria should win a very high percentage of the time. His odds wouldn't carry an implied probability of 81% if that wasn't the case. But again, playing devil's advocate, there are a couple paths to victory here for Gaethje. The first being, like we said, he does hit very hard, and ultimately it only takes one shot to land clean and hard to put your opponent away. It's not impossible Gaethje could win this by knockout. The second is that obviously there's a size difference between these two. You know, Topuria is moving up from featherweight into this lightweight division now, where he's facing bigger guys who hit harder, and maybe all that extra weight from Topuria makes him slower, affects his cardio. Who knows, it could also make him, you know, better cardio and have more power because he's got more energy, he's not depleting himself with weight cuts. But could go either way. That's another potential intangible and path to victory for Gaethje. And then a third path to victory for Gaethje would be, you know, Topuria has had a lot of drama in his private life, issues with divorcing his wife. I've seen him go back and forth a lot with Gaethje online and various other people in the UFC. And, you know, I'm not saying that Topuria has reached the level of like a Conor McGregor or like a John Jones yet, but, or like even a Ronda Rousey maybe, although John and Conor are better examples. But a lot of these very skilled, very high level fighters do follow a similar sort of career arc where on their come up, when they're these young hungry bulls, they look unstoppable and they're fast and they're technical and they're well rounded and they're motivated. Like if you think of Conor on his title run, he looked unbelievable. If you look at John Jones on his title run, he was unbelievable. And then with fame comes drama and controversy and personal issues. And you know, when John Jones had all his personal issues with, you know, the pregnant lady and the USADA suspensions and the problems with his wife, when he then came back against Ovin St. Preux and Dominic Reyes, he looked an absolute shadow of himself. He looked absolutely terrible. You know, he looked like a completely different guy. And then when you look at Conor, when he was on that title run, he looked amazing. And then when he got all the money and the fame, you start seeing personal issues, you know, reports of issues with his wife where he's not getting on well, the rape cases, you know, the drugs, the alcohol. And then when he comes back against Nate Diaz and Dustin Poirier, he looks a shadow of himself, right? Nowhere near the fast, technical, explosive, motivated guy we saw on that title run. So look, we saw Topuria a year ago against Oliveira. We can't really decipher too much from that performance because it ended in 2.5 minutes. Who really knows how Topuria was looking in that time? So it's been, you know, it's been a while since we had a good look at Topuria. We haven't really had a good look at him since he fought Max Holloway all the way back in October 2024. And a lot can change in almost 2 years, right? It's been 18 months since we last saw him. So look, you know, again, anyone with eyes and a brain can tell you that Topuria is much more likely to win this weekend. But look, as a professional gambler, it's my job to play devil's advocate. Look at all the different possible ways that a fight could go, so that when we're live betting a matchup like this, we can start to spot the early signs that a fight is heading in a very specific direction, so that we can attack that kind of scenario and make some money from profiting in the way that fight is going to go. And so I'm just keeping a very open mind on this. Most likely scenario is 81% of the time Topuria is going to come out, completely outclass Gaethje on the feet, put on a striking clinic and dominate. But there's those 19% of the time where there's those three factors. Will Topuria's personal issues get to him? Will he look better or worse at lightweight? Can Gaethje land a big shot and hurt him? We don't know. But from a live betting point of view, from a pre-fight betting point of view, we need to focus far more energy on Justin Gaethje in this one than Ilia Topuria, because at an implied probability of 81%, you'd have to give Topuria at least an 85% chance of to make any money on this one, which is impossible to do against someone as dangerous as Gaethje, especially when you consider all the other factors we've spoken about. But it's a very bad stylistic matchup for Gaethje, so at an implied probability of 19%, I'm not rushing out to bet Gaethje here. And I'm going to stick to live betting on this one. Sorry to be boring. It's a very tough fight from a pre-fight betting point of view. It's a very tough card from a pre-fight betting point of view. In terms of the fight spread, I'm not interested because I think Topuria will most likely stop Gaethje and knock him out. And the odds on the fight spread on Topuria are very, very steep. And in terms of the over-under, I tell you what, over 1.5 rounds is quite interesting in the even money odds range. But I'm going to pass on this and sit back, enjoy the fights, hopefully make a bit of money on the World Cup this weekend, and hopefully you found this video useful. I'm sorry not to have more action for you. We've obviously had a lot of bets recently. We had 5 bets on the last card, was it? 5 bets on the last card. 3 of them won, 2 of them lost. We had winners on Brendan Allen, Bryce Mitchell, Joanderson Brito. We lost on Bruno Silva, Belal Muhammad. Very frustrating to not see Belal Muhammad grapple more. So yeah, hopefully we can make some money on the World Cup this weekend. Hopefully we can make money live betting the UFC. Hopefully you join my live betting groups for either UFC or football or both. And you can find links in the description below on how to do that. Hopefully you join the team and then enjoy making money. Most months of the year, 65% of months on football are profitable, 72% of months on the UFC are profitable. So if you want to make money betting on sports, I'm a pretty good way for you to be able to do that. Come and join the team. Have a great weekend. I love you all. I'll see you in the live streams, hopefully for the World Cup. I'll see you in the live betting groups, hopefully in the community. And if you don't want to join the team, if you're not interested, then maybe we'll see you back here for next week's UFC breakdown video for that Kyoji Horiguchi and Manel Cap card, which is looking like a much better event than this one. Forget all the fanfare, forget the fireworks, forget the White House and all the fucking hype on this card. It's absolutely trash. And the next week's card, the Fight Night card between Cap and Horiguchi, far better for betting. So we'll see you then. Take care everyone, love you all, nice one guys, bye.